Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Green and Climate Finance session, moderated by Sofia Karadima, economist and investment writer, SDGs and ESG, with the participation of Shiva Dustdar, director, head of the EIB Institute, Gabriela Chang, co-founder, EthicHub, Coenraad de Vries, co-founder, managing partner, StartGreen Capital, Franz Josef Allmayer, founder, Integrity.Earth, Hypha, Digihub.li.
I'm Sofia Karadima. I'm a journalist and researcher specializing in global investments and ESG. The panel today is about green and climate finance, and I'm excited to be here with our speakers that they are going to share their expertise and insights on how green and climate finance shapes the alternative finance world. So I'm delighted to introduce you all here today. Welcome. Welcome. So to start with, I would like to ask all of you to give us a short introduction about yourself and how your organizations are related and your job and your roles are related to green and climate finance. I would like to start with you, Shiva. Can you elaborate on the role that alternative finance plays in promoting sustainable and climate-friendly projects? And how is EIB contributing to this?
Thank you very much. I don't know whether this is the question where I briefly bring also some slides, or is
yes,
that later?
Yes, if you
okay.
Can start
so in that case, I may just ask them to upload them. But anyway, welcome. I mean, not welcome, but I mean, thank you for having me also on this panel.
The slide changer.
Oh, the slide changer. Okay. Well, some of you heard me yesterday, so I won't really bore you with another introduction, but if you look at money, innovation, sustainability, that's basically the story of my professional life. In terms of the EIB and the EIB Institute, we are, as many of you know, we are the EU Climate Bank, have the ambition to really ensure that in line with EU policy of really tackling climate change, since 2021, all our activities are aligned to the Paris Agreement. So this actually has been quite transformational, and it's continued to be transformational for the bank, because as you may know, the EIB has actually, let me just see whether the slides are already there. Oh yeah, perfect, yeah. So the EIB has, was obviously created 1958 to connect Europe. So that meant, financing a lot of roads, a lot of airports, a lot of infrastructure. Now we have a climate bank roadmap, which actually is quite clear in the guidance of what we can finance and what we no longer can finance. This means actually for the European Union some rather, certain sort of limitations when it comes to, let's say, airports and certain roads and all of, those initiatives. But ultimately, what it really does is it's focusing our mind to ensure that we are actively targeting a 50% of our total lending to be contributing towards climate action and environmental sustainability. And of course, a lot of that is going towards both the mitigation side, which has of course been the bulk so far. I mean, roughly 95%. 5% has been adaptation. That percentage we are targeting to triple in the coming years. So what that actually, and this sort of slide gives you a bit of a sense of the magnitude of volumes that we have achieved in 2022. This is obviously an ambitious, agenda, and it will continuously growing. So right now we are actually basically hitting our targets of roughly 50% annually very, very soon. Now, maybe coming back to the question of why alternative finance and EIB Institute, and I think this is where I would perhaps like to quickly link it. I mean, you all know about maybe the investment gaps. I mean, we are all, as you were saying earlier, Piotr, hit by a lot of negative news on the reports that come, and then of course also about the investment needs in renewable energy, in basically transforming our economy to decarbonize. So what it means, and this is where I would like to perhaps bring in alternative finance and the role also of the EIB Institute. We have, of course, a number of financial products along the whole chain, in terms of the companies, sort of life cycle, in terms of whether it's infrastructure, innovation. And the products are either intermediated, so you will hear later also from my colleagues in the EIF who are moderating some panels, some of the impact funds that we're investing, some of your beneficiaries, some of the microfinance institutions. So a lot of those actually are very much either the intermediaries are actively sort of part of an alternative finance ecosystem, or are supporting or investing in companies that are developing alternative finance solutions. When it comes to a more mainstream EIB banking, so the loans and the sort of project finance activities, it may seem a bit more distant to alternative finance, but here I would like to actually very much now bring in some of the ideas that we're listening to on longevity, on inclusive finance, and perhaps just maybe leave with the thought of if you look at innovations over the years, and if you look at more and more data coming out, and I'm now focusing on gender, for instance, this is Caroline Perez in her famous best-selling book of Invisible Women. Basically, we are dealing with a world that was in a way created or built by men for men. That's the way she's putting it. And I recently listened to a podcast which was fascinating about innovation and gender. And did you know that the first electrical cars in the early 1900s, there were two types of cars, the cars that we know on fossil fuels and electrical cars. Did you know that somewhere they marketed those electrical cars to the women? Even Mrs. Ford had an electrical car because they were used as for women. What then happened, I mean, among other reasons, and apparently historians call them cultural reasons, the electrical cars were no longer seen as maybe, for men, because they were for women, and the electric cars were abandoned. So let's look at this from an alternative finance perspective, how important it is to look at inclusion, because a lot of the innovation, if it doesn't bring in the inclusion into it, we actually, we would not have a lot of the climate problems if we had electrical cars become our main, transport means. So I leave it here as food for thought, and thank you very much.
Now I would like to turn to Coenraad, and I would like to ask you what motivated you to start StartGreen Capital, and how does your company contribute to green and climate finance?
Yeah, thank you. Also, thanks that you invited me here. I'm not sure if I had a presentation, but much. Oh, yeah, it's there. Okay, great. Thank you. What's motivating is that I'm always thinking you need more money to tackle this problem, right? So we need to enable much more money to fight climate change, not only for startups, new technologies, but also for new energy projects, which are also usually really hard to get finance in the early stage, before there's any permit or any capability to do the project. I started doing venture capital in 2006 in early stage ventures, but this then called clean tech. This was for the credit crisis. We did for 10 years, and after 10 years I realized the next frustration in the sense, okay, we still need more money, funds are not enough, and there's a lot of saving available by people. And so why not democratize, why not enable the money from all the people in the Netherlands, because it's a Netherlands-based company, and try to finance these early stage companies and these energy projects, make energy again, sustainable energy, part of their daily living, of their own ownership. So this was actually the reason to set up One Planet Crowd. As I said here, so we believe in entrepreneurs who can make the change. We need entrepreneurs for that, and we think we can connect the people, the investors, normal people, citizens living around the park or like the companies, to to finance it. So it's a direct connection between the actors, the movers, and the one who's financing it. And that's in the basis of what we have done with One Planet Crowd. And another frustration is more also a bit personal. If you are working in the venture capital industry, then actually, and it's lucky now changing, but it used to be that the good deals, so the good companies, were only shared between the wealthy families, the high net worth individuals. So there was not, I mean, I don't think they don't allow it, but it was just how it was. So we also want to democratize deals, so that people can also be part of these early stage growth companies. And we did it on this model. So what we do actually in the middle is One Planet Crowd. And One Planet Crowd is like a matching platform. So we get money from individuals, family officers, business angels. It's all a mix of individuals. And we have money coming in from banks, venture capital, energy funds, corporates. Even AF is sometimes joining in, so that's good news. And we match it and we bring the money to the entrepreneurs, meaning SMEs, fast-growing SMEs, scale-ups, decentralized energy projects. And on the left side you can see a few of our companies. And this is the main model. And the reason we think, and we still think, this is a slide from 10 years ago. That's funny, and this slide before, no, it's not, but 10 years ago, we already saw 3 big market trends, which are still here. And one is there's a massive amount of public saving. Even through COVID times, even through energy crisis, still people are saving. And I'm not talking about the Netherlands, so probably the little difference in Europe, but this is the Dutch market. And Dutch are good at saving, as we all know, so we're saving. So there's a lot of money there. And the other thing is that there's still, like you also see, there's a massive gap in financing. This is the green one on the left here. So sustainable entrepreneurs still need money. And they need money in the early stage phase, not in the later stage phase. So, because later stage, everybody wants to step in, pension funds, banks, but there's no problem there. And the third one, and it was 10 years ago, and you see now with the whole movement on blockchain and new technology, it's even growing quicker, but people like to do it themselves. If I ask my sons, they are around 20, they do everything themselves. They check their own matters, they don't go into funds, they do their own investment, so they do it yourself, they do their own traveling, so there's a lot of new movement on do it yourself, have flexibility. So that's also about crowdfunding. So these 3 trends, there's sustainable crowdfunding in the middle, making it possible to finance. And that's my last slide, so no worries. So we also see that besides enabling money for which is really important, money into the the chain sustainability, we also see that crowdfunding is much more than money. And in our 2 target groups, we do either clean tech scale-ups or decentralized energy projects, meaning energy projects in the neighborhood, small wind parks, solar fields, biomass. You see that it's more because it's also connecting people to the energy. So people know I'm also an owner or a financing of this windmill. Yeah? It's in the neighborhood. I'm also part of the solar field. I'm part of this isolation of this building. And we also have lots of research, and we see that people also then use their energy a bit different, meaning less, because they know how difficult it is to produce energy, to make it. So that's one thing. And the other thing, if you look to the scale-ups, you see that we did electric bicycles, we did Fairphone. I'm not sure people know Fairphone, but it's the first circular cell phone. It's financed by One Planet Crowd and a few venture capital parties. But they not only collected money, they collected a lot of customers. They sell a lot of new cell phones to their new investors. So it's really nice to see that there's a sort of, people are not only financiers, they're also ambassadors and really active customers. So that's the other power of it.
Now I'd like to turn to you. Organizations, can you tell us how do they contribute to green and climate alternative finance? How do they support regenerative development?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for having me here, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you, and thanking you for providing the space for these important conversations to be had. My name is Franz Josef Allmayer, and I want to speak a little bit about what got me to be doing this. So, before I started in fintech, I come from the health perspective. I'm a biomedical engineer and worked for a long time with the World Health Organization, Clinton Foundation, and had some deep realizations in that process. That even if we were to put all the money in the world to solve these things, it would actually exacerbate the problem even more, because there's a dysfunction at the root of the nature of money that we need to address. Currently, from the usage of money, there's negative externalities that even if we keep adding more without resolving that, we're not really addressing the root of the problem. So in that sense, I went to explore how other organizations, how other communities have been organizing themselves money, and I became inspired to really see how we can repurpose money to serve a world in which people and planet are actually taken care of. So really seeing economy as a system of well-being and not just as something to maximize profit, as you were saying in terms of the enterprise and Milton Friedman. It's all about creating economical systems that benefit people and planet. So in my fintech ventures, one of the first ventures that I co-created is called Seeds, essentially a digital currency, a complementary currency, where instead of having a centralized entity deciding what the values are for the rest of the planet, which puts people, nature, culture, spirit in a market failure, you're able to put those people behind the money creation and distribution and allowing us to complement those market failures that are allowing there. And interestingly enough, that becomes a powerful vehicle for collaborative impact investment that allows the former capital markets to support the systems and to actually create anti-rival economies that in a digital world, you have zero marginal costs. So these things become more valuable the more you use them rather than scarce. In that process, we managed to really see that demand for this is huge. So seeing in a couple months, 20,000 of people become token holders and starting to activate and engaging in climate solutions and in green solutions, we realized, okay, we need a next piece of technology to allow all of these contributions to be aggregated. And in that, we created the Hypha DAO. I don't know if you can show there, but it's essentially a technology that allows contributions to be accounted for, and contributions in multiple forms of capital, and allowing this capital markets to be owned and governed by the communities that own them themselves. So the slides are not showing, but doesn't really matter. And following the next iteration of work that we've been doing is right now we've also become a digital innovation hub for the Principality of Liechtenstein under the premise of the European Commission. And our mandate there right now is to apply these new technologies to create regenerative economic models that serve people and planet. So also supporting small and medium enterprises in allowing these digital structures to create anti-rival economies where now these new experiments in economics can unfold and serve all the users.
And now let's turn to Gabriela. So I would like to ask you, how is EthicHub using technology to solve real-world problems?
Well, thank you. I'm Gabriela Chang. My team and I are pioneers using blockchain technology for real use cases. Since 2018, we are doing international transference to smallholder farmers. That this is enable anyone in the world to become an impact investor with as little as $20. So, blockchain initial promise was to enable a financial system where no one was left excluded. And so far, we are playing with new speculative markets, with new financial derivatives, with monkeys, with CryptoKitties. But it's time to make the real job, to get serious on this. Because according to the World Bank, a quarter of the world population is excluded from the financial system. This means for these people, the only source of working capital is the little cash loans they can find within their own communities, often paying more than 100% interest for this little money. This is called the poverty trap. And the bad news is that most of the unbanked are the smallholder farmers producing 1/3 of the world's food, our food. This is a huge problem, but also a huge opportunity because the financial need, the unmet financial need is almost $1 trillion. So Do you remember this King Midas story about touching everything, converting to gold? Well, we know we cannot eat, breathe, or drink money. Money is just a vehicle for happiness and well-being, and the current system is excluding 2 billion people from this well-being. But they live in the greenest and most vulnerable areas of the planet, so their well-being is ours. They said Web 2, that's internet, it's about competitors, while Web 3, blockchain, it's about collaborators. We need to collaborate in order to solve these global problems, these planetary problems. We are already addressing the financial exclusion part, but we also need to work on the other exclusion forms for the unbanked. They are too small, so they are excluded from the traditional financial system, but they are also excluded from the traditional certification systems, and they are also excluded from the benefits from the carbon markets and the biological services they provide to the planet. So it's very important to find a new solution, because 2 billion people is not a mishappening of the system, it's a structural failure of the system. So we need to build a financial system, a global system that considers that we are leaving behind 1 out of every 4 human beings. So we are working in collaboration with amazing partners, as I say, and I invite you also to come over and join us on this. What we have done is build a global community that benefits from interacting, aligning the incentives, so making doing the right things a good business. I won't get into technical details, but I'm available who anyone want to talk about this. I think tokenomics are a powerful tool to create alternative solutions, because they enable the alignment of the incentives of the participants to do the right things, because it's what benefits them and creates more value to the community, and this value can be shared, distributed among all the participants. The current system is, the fintechs are addressing the unbanked, focusing on data. But what about the millions of farmers who don't have Wi-Fi, so they don't have data? And for an example, coffee, everybody enjoys and knows the huge business it is. 80% of the global production of coffee is in the hands of people with 2 hectares of land. Poor people. Why they are poor? It's not that the banks don't lend them money because they are poor. They are poor because despite producing so much value, they don't have access to the services we take for granted. So the other option is to have assets as collateral. But 2 hectares of land are of no commercial interest for the current system, despite all the benefits, ecological benefits they provide, but that is not being accounted as value yet. But we, after pandemics, we understand that value is something different than money. As I was saying, we cannot eat or drink the money. So for these farmers who don't have collateral and don't have data, EthicHub created crowd collateral, which is kind of a blended finance 2.0, where everyone can participate. If it sounds too good to be true, we have lots of awards recognizing our job. The most recently one we are very proud of is INATBA, who awarded us as most exciting regenerative finance project on this year. And well, I would like to invite you to make a reflection, to think about the purpose in life, the purpose of economics. We can do a better world by doing better business. It's not an oxymoron anymore. And I'm very happy to say that we are in this intersection between impact and crypto that look like opposite, because impact investors are very traditional and they are beware of Web3, and crypto bros don't think real life is a business, but it is. So please, let's join this revolution. Let's make things better if we want, and make them different if we want different results. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and it's a very good point that we have to make things different if we want a different world. So now I want Franz, Josef, to turn to you and ask you, so how does alternative finance offer unique opportunities for promoting green and climate finance, and how does it differ from traditional finance? How can we make things different there?
Great question, yeah. So in essence, I think, it's been touched across the point, but the way we're measuring things today in the traditional finance sense is done almost from a reductionist point of view. We see capital has multiple dimensions. Today we're measuring things based on merely financial capital by leaving natural capital, human capital left behind, and other forms of capital. There's at least 10 forms of capital that we're recognizing. So you get what you measure, and if you're only measuring money, you're only going to be subsidizing petrochemical industries at the tune of trillions. You're only going to be making money from wars. So that's actually where the incentives are in our economy. If you see today, if there's an energy crisis, the energy companies profit. If there's a health crisis, the pharmaceutical industrial profits. So the incentives are actually on their head, which is a very crazy thing to acknowledge, but it's a fact. So here comes the opportunity. For years, the only way for asking for economical change has been to beg governments, which are often captured in reductionist or corporate interests. But here comes along Web3. Now, as human beings, we have the ability to create our own economical systems, our own economical forms of organization, our own governance systems that are aligned with our values. And this is accessible digitally anywhere in the world for anyone. So as you were saying, as many people are excluded, now it's as simple as downloading an app and being actually financially included anywhere. And that financial inclusion includes more dimensions of capital, which actually makes these currencies, these forms of value, much more powerful than simply reductionist mere paper money, which can be printed at the tune of trillions, which is debasing our value systems for the rest of us. So in that sense, the alternative finance that is ahead of us and is opening up a very promising future is very exciting, because now we have the tools to actually create a regenerative world that works for 100% of the planet without leaving anyone behind. That's what excites me about alternative finance.
Thank you very much. So now I would like to ask Shiva about that. And if you could share with us any success stories of EIB's effort in promoting green and climate finance and alternative finance, and how these stories have impacted the wider financial sector.
Thank you very much. I guess the way I would now put it is I would maybe speak a bit more from an EIB Institute perspective. And here, I didn't perhaps go into any detail so far. We have, one perhaps success story is we're sitting in it. We're supporting this initiative. This conference, the AFF. This is, I believe, the third time that we're doing so. And I believe, what is really important here is our role as helping conveners to bring all of us together, but more also very importantly to learn and take whatever we learn from you all, which I have to say, as you saw, I'm taking notes, because we really need to also future-proof our own financial instruments. You saw that we have, on the face of it, we are using maybe conventional, traditional financing tools. However, they all actually have embedded in them features that maybe were alternative in earlier times. We were looking at impact before impact was a thing, because that was the way the EIB had always, we never gave a loan for general corporate purposes. It always had to be linked to a project. It had to be linked to eligible costs, and therefore what the money was used for was very critical. And we, in a way, therefore, without calling it impact financing, we're looking at the impact from a social, from many environmental, climate perspective. So, therefore, however, what the Institute also is doing, in addition to, of course, sponsoring, we have a very successful social innovation tournament, and this is another way where we are very often in those tournaments. The applicants are coming with alternative finance solutions, either on the financing side or business models that very much would benefit ultimately from alternative finance solutions, because the conventional financial, instruments are not necessarily, as you rightly point out, giving the benefit of the externalities are not ultimately compensating for potentially for the understanding of the risk versus return, and therefore we do need to have those instruments. So the Social Innovation Tournament, which I highly recommend you look into if you don't know about it, and you encourage companies to apply, is a very successful way of supporting it. Now, the third angle is that increasingly the EIB Institute will position itself as a gateway for new thinking in our engagement with think tanks, with people like yourself, to bring in that new thinking into the EIB. And I think here, what I hope in the future to really bring in also fintech a bit more explicitly into it. I mentioned yesterday that we are already issuing hybrid bonds that have already blockchain technology embedded. But if you think of it, and also presentation later yesterday, how we're sort of the pathfinder here, but we will hopefully enable in the future smaller companies to issue bonds with blockchain. This is a big thing. I mean, if we, and it will actually transform the EIF business. I don't know how actively EIF is looking at these trends, but certainly the Institute can be an interesting entry point. So I would therefore highly encourage those of you who are not already in touch with us to be in touch and let us know how we can, develop and scale up those ideas also within our group.
Sounds good, and thank you also for highlighting the thing about the future-proofing. And that is something that I would like also to ask Coenraad. So we speak about future-proofing, about the future. So I was wondering, how do you think that investments in green and climate finance would play out in the years to come? Where do you think innovation plays a key role into this?
Yeah, well, I think there's so much changing at this moment, and there's so much great movement, and what we see now in the market is that, for instance, crowdfunding is, I think, in Netherlands, Europe now for 10, 12 years. It started with small platforms and it's now becoming a real industry. I mean, like Olivier always told us, as the Crowdfunding Association, we now have this European license. So all the platforms in Europe have their own permit. So that's totally regulated now, which means that we as crowdfunding sector are actually in the same playing field, regulation-wise, as banks and the venture capital and private equity industry. Although on the financial instruments from banks or institutional banks, we're not on the same playing field. So the thing is, if you are financing an early stage company or you're financing an early stage project and you are a bank, you usually have guarantees or grants or a smart financial instrument as a bank to take this risk. Crowdfunding platforms are not in that field, and I think this is really a missing point. I mean, and I understand these things take time, and you have to talk about it with the national and international European banks. But it would be super great, of course, that if the individual people invest in their own solar field, which is nearby, which they can see with the energy they use, and they take this risk, which is a high risk in the beginning. They don't get the same guarantees as the bank, who also steps in with them in the same project, which is of course a little odd. So I think we should find ways to, and I now can understand it because it's about how the finance industry was built the last 100 years. So banks are used to lend to banks, and banks are used to give guarantees to other banks, but they're not used to give guarantees to individuals. But there are models there, and that's one big movement. So I think the whole industry of democratizing capital is growing quick. It's not only going quick by crowdfunding. What you see now is the whole blockchain movement, and everything around is also really challenging and really exciting, because if crowdfunding and blockchain could find each other more, and I think there's a lot of new initiative in that area, what then happens is actually you create a new capital market. Because if we mediate a loan or equity to an energy project or a sustainable company, it's usually as a yeah, as an individual, you have to, you cannot sell directly your product. There's no secondary market. So it's still a bit difficult. You have to wait the duration of your loan to get paid back, or you have to wait till somebody later on wants to buy your stock, or the company is exited on the market. So, but if blockchain technology, and that's also we're looking at for our platform, like the DLT, the digital ledger treatment facilities, or the new capabilities to have with blockchain technology, your tokenized your loans and equity, then it can be really exciting, because then either individual can have, can be mediated on crowdfunding platforms or other platforms, and then use blockchain technology as a way to have a secondary market. So then there will be a completely new playing field of flowing of capital to a really efficient way to entrepreneurs. So that's the general.
That's a very good point, and thank you for highlighting this. Now I would like to turn to Gabriela, and I have another question for you. So we have been speaking about the investments, about the importance, about alternative finance, but what about the farmers? And what about the opportunities for them there to join the different initiatives and be included in the system? So I would like to ask you, what are the social and environmental consequences of the inclusion of the smaller holder farmers regarding agroforestry crops? Is it key for climate change?
Yes, of course. As I was explaining at the beginning, agriculture is key for climate change. And family agriculture, these smallholder farmers, if you put them together, they are producing a huge amount of food for all the planet, and from some of the very vulnerable areas of the globe also. So looking for the well-being is spreading this well-being around the world, and because the social impact it has, they're directly related to the basic covering of their financial needs. Because when we are talking about the poverty trap, it means they are able to pay over 100% interest. Imagine what's that. And they are able to pay it. But the problem is that most of the effort of their job goes to pay the debt, and they keep for themselves very little for cover just very basic needs. I mean, if they get sick, they cannot save to have money to buy medicines. They have to ask for a loan to pay for the medicines. It's terrible. So any financial improvement there reflects on the social environment, because they can plan for the future. They can think if they can send their children to the school. Things as basic as we take for granted when we live in the developed side of the world. We have a disconnected world. We are now talking about global north and global south, again dividing the world when we are all in the same boat. We need to reconnect everything to make it work. And by starting with the financial part, we link with the environmental and the social. And environmental, why? Because I said an example. Coffee lands, except for Brazil, that has these flatlands in the correct height, the rest of the coffee lands are steep mountains. When farmers cannot make a living out of coffee, they cut down the huge trees beneath. They have the crops, and they cut down the coffee, and they plant, for example, corn. So they can eat for 1 or 2 years. But with the heavy rains of those areas, the land is deployed, is lost. So they migrate to the United States if they are in Mexico, for example. And they left behind a whole devastation in nature that is affecting us. That's why it is so correlated, the tree impact. So by enabling a true financial inclusion, and by financial inclusion, I don't mean to providing more services to the people we already have within the system, but including the excluded, we have this triple impact: social, environmental, and economic.
It's good that you highlight that. So now I would like also to turn again to Shiva and ask you, how do you see the future of green finance in alternative finance space evolving, and what role can public institutions like the EIB play in shaping this?
Yes, this is obviously, the crux of the matter. And I'm listening really to Gabriela and everybody here on the panel. I think the key, as I also mentioned yesterday, is how can ensure that these brilliant ideas and so obvious issues that are nevertheless even more obviously, as you say, discarded or ignored or not brought into the financial sort of architecture and financial products, how can we bring them in, and how can the EIB actually become the enabler and scale those. Yeah, so the key is, because these are very important initiatives that you all are engaged in, but they don't have yet the scale. And the scale comes in through, and I think this is where really the publics, and not just the EIB, the World Bank, all the large multilateral institutions who are now all becoming the climate banks, all becoming the green banks, that is sort of, in order to truly then become so, we do need to learn from the innovation that is happening in the financial markets. And therefore, it's a public-private partnership. I would very much think so. And usually the way financial innovation happens in these larger institutions like the EIB is through piloting these initiatives in projects, in a specific loan to look at how could we bring in this feature. That's one way. On the other hand, we also can support through our EIF, through our various funding programs, your companies. So that's another way. And we can also bring your companies in as consultants for technical assistance and capacity building in the wider sort of ecosystem. So there are many ways I think we can play the role. We're probably not doing as much as we could. I mean, listening to you guys, I just realized there's a huge potential. So I would very much welcome a much closer interaction. And this is the sort of forum where we need to do that.
Thank you very much. So now about that, I would also ask the opinion of Coenraad. Where do you see opportunities for public participation in green and climate finance? In which sectors and regions?
Yeah, I see there's a lot of opportunities because there's also a lot of work need to be done to get whole Europe out of the fossil industry. But I see especially a lot of opportunity, also because that's the hardest place, is in the relative small projects in the regions. You got to keep in mind that clean energy is also a lot of landfill. That's the problem actually. So if you place somewhere windmills, solar panels, you change a building, you have load stations for electric car. It's all filling land. It's all in your personal space in a way if you live somewhere. So the integration of this stuff we need is technology, but it's also building. It's you have to build windmills, you have to build electric car loading stations, you have to make solar fields available. So so what I see is the opportunity that we find ways to integrate it more in the local societies, and to do that I think you should connect local societies more. And like I said before, either by crowdfunding, blockchain, of energy corporations. I mean, there are a lot of big movements going on there in this area about local, and then it's so less in your face in a way, because then it's your own energy production, it's your own energy use or your own energy saving. Because then, and I think so, we should find ways to do smaller projects, and the bigger projects are no problem. If you look to the Netherlands, they will build massive amounts of windmills at the North Sea. This is really good. We need it. This is production we need. But this is the ball game, not for innovation, because the pension funds, the big banks will step in there, because it's massive projects, right? So the project more, the capex of projects like 10 to 20 million in a local area, a wind park, a solar park. These sort of projects are hardly financed if you don't find a way to get this done. And then you get to sort of structural problems with funds, is that if you do smaller projects, it costs more time, because each project needs to be structured, you need to be checking stuff. So it's a bit the chick of the egg problem is actually how do we find larger funds and good policy measurements where we can guarantee these sort of projects, and then make sure that they are also locally financed and locally embedded in the society.
Sounds good. Gabriela, I would like to ask you about that as well. There are several organizations that they are pledging investments in green and climate finance. Some of them, they're walking the walk, like they're really investing in this sector. Other organizations, they're just discussing about that, but they're not really backing projects. So sometimes we see that there is the risk also of greenwashing, discussing more about that, but not really doing it. So from your side, from your point of view, do you see enough investments going into green and climate finance? And what else can be done in order for more money to be invested in this area?
Well, I think what is being done is not enough, obviously, evidently. And, well, I'm more a pro person than anti. So I think even greenwashing, at least, is a bit of something before not doing anything at all. But it's very important to take action and to move forward fast enough as for our children not to face the apocalypse zombie-like bad movie scenario. We need to move fast, and we need to change, as I was saying at the beginning. If we want different outcomes, we have to try different things that we've been doing until now. The devil is in the details. As Coenraad, as you said, the big projects are already funded. The problem is the little ones. All the system is not meant for the little ones, not for the little startups, not for the little farmers, but guess what? We are millions if we put us together. So we need to rethink how to reach down those projects, those farmers, those small scales, because the whole world is built mainly by small scale. So we need to adapt the global system with the current reality. And the current reality is that the financial system is giving money to the huge, already established companies that are not solving the problems we are addressing. So we need to invest. We need to be more, you say braver? Braver. We need to be brave and to take higher risk into the high value solutions. I'm not talking about, you started talking about that. It's like the financial system is wrongly incentivized because they want to protect the capital, but the monetary capital. We also have social and environmental capital, and we should invest into those and rethink what we consider risk. It's monetary risk, and what about the environmental risk? What about what we are living in our planet in the last, not decades, but the last years? All the fire around the world, all the drought, the floods, everything that the planet is talking. So we need to do things in a different scale to be able to reach the biggest problems with the small solutions.
You turned to Franz Josef earlier, so now I would like to turn to him as well. And I would like to ask you, how alternative finance platforms work with public institutions, governments, and regulatory bodies to promote green finance and sustainable energy projects?
Great question, yeah. I think the opportunity again with these digital technologies, as we're in the threshold of moving into the information age, where we can no longer hide those externalities that you've been speaking about, where all this information is available to see, where we're moving away from this industrial age, where that was essentially business as usual. These technologies are inclusive in design. You can access them from across the world, and that's also very important for essentially a multi-stakeholder approach that allows all of the stakeholders to come together and work towards shared purpose. And that's really the beauty of it. You know, we're able to now have this economical conduits that make impact effective and efficient in real time, and you can actually measure that. And by inviting others to join, whether it's the public sector, whether it's the civil society, whether it's, you know, the smallholder farmers, into a unified impulse, that's really the promise of what these technologies are bringing about and what alternative finance is going to become. I'm very excited about this too, because the reality is that green impact finance is the finance of the future. There's no other option. We have to be inclusive, not only in terms of our stakeholders, which include North and South, and there's no longer any need for those divisions, as you were rightfully saying too, but also across dimensions of capital, which really creates an evolution of what money is altogether. And money is simply an agreement, but an agreement to actually have a well-being for everybody who's involved in that process of contributing to a healthy economy. That's the opportunity that we have, and yeah.
It's good that you mentioned the word capital, because we have received a question from the audience that is about that. So the question is, what are the different forms of capital next to the financial capital, and how do you measure these types of capital? So who would like to go first? Who would like to answer?
I can answer that. Especially, we've designed an amazing platform. So I'll be also speaking about this later on. So essentially, the concept of a decentralized autonomous organization gives you the opportunity to use this token technologies to measure essentially contributions in multiple forms of capital. So capital in its multiple dimensions, let's say nature. How do you value the value of a tree? How do you think about cultural capital? How do you value the history of Greece, where we are right now? It's no coincidence that Greece has been sort of the cradle of democracy. These technologies are also democratizing the ways we value these multiple forms of capital too. So in terms of our platform design too, which I'll be showing later, who best to value something like nature or culture than the people who are their stakeholders? So actually, what money is actually a common language. It's how do you relate to something in terms of monetary terms. So in the platform that we have, you're able to, for example, do that as a proposal where other members of the community agree to that value. And if they don't agree, it doesn't go through. But once it agreed, it has actually a market common value. And the beautiful thing about tokenization of it is that whenever you have a collective or essentially a digital or data commons, which belongs to everybody, we can actually make everybody who is a stakeholder of that a fractionalized owner of it. So it's no longer about, I'm taking this and there's no for you. Is how can we steward something collectively? That now we have the economical tools to actually steward that and give value to those multiple forms of capital, which are natural capital, cultural capital, spiritual capital, which is something very intangible, but now you can actually do that. We have, for example, communities where we've done this multi-stakeholder process where we go to communities and ask them what jobs, what roles in society have been destroyed by the centralization of, colonialization, for example. And their answers are amazing. For example, midwives, spiritual healers. There's no monetary valuation for those contributions in society, but now we can actually give value to those things again and let the community self-organize to steward that value on behalf of everybody.
Thank you for answering the question. And Shiva, please.
Can I just add,
Yes.
and I'm sure you implied it, but human capital. And if you think of it, human capital, right now, the financial system is, basically, and the whole industrial system is ignoring pretty much 50% of the population, meaning women. Only 2% of VC goes to women entrepreneurs, even though they are the founders of roughly 33%, over 30% of companies. So there is a complete imbalance, and this is where I think, again, alternative finance, because of the democratization, because of the mindset shift and everything you have said, also a lot of the small farm holders, a lot of them are women. And women actually very often have lacked access to finance because of collateral issues and laws that were punishing them. So this is actually, to me, one of the biggest opportunities, I also think, for alternative finance, to really look at the whole population and make use of that full capital.
Gabriela, you would like
to
I
would like to add something to this different type of capital. Someone said very simple, social, environmental, and monetary capital. There is also inspirational capital, many ways. But at the end, all of it means that we have to consider value, things that are not only money. And I think alternative finance are an amazing tool to make economics regenerative, not extractive. And we start to think what's the real cost of producing something. A very simple example I always use is when we build a chair. We consider the price of the wood, the carpenter, the supply chain to sell it, but we didn't consider the tree and the value of that tree, and not the monetary value of that tree, but all the services the tree was also providing. How can we account for that? And no, this is basics from accountability, accounting. You don't have profit on spite of capital. So we have to consider all capital together to see if we are really being productive. And if we keep in this extractive model of economics, we will be in debt with the planet and with the society, and also financially in debt, I guess, if we keep on this way.
Coenraad, you would like also to share your opinion?
Yeah, I think if you call it capital or value, I mean, the whole society should think much more imbalanced in what we're doing with the money and what we are creating, and especially make sure that we don't do more negative on that side, and that we also are inclusive, meaning female entrepreneurship. Also, if you look at the Netherlands, a lot of migration background people have lack of finance, not in a way that they are neglected, more in the way that they don't have the networks. And usually the entrepreneur networks are built around universities, business schools. So it's not always easy to also be inclusive in the system. And that's something we have to talk with each other about, because it's also sometimes in the mindset in a way. So yeah.
It's great that all of you have mentioned the word inclusivity, and I think this is something to notice, that the alternative finance can really support the inclusivity and find opportunities there. So we have 5 more minutes. I would like all of you to get like 30 seconds to tell us your final remarks before wrapping up. So I would like to start with you, Franz, Josef.
Yeah. Final remarks from my end. I think the future is absolutely bright. We're in this threshold of really creating a regenerative society, and the first adopters will also be the ones who benefit the most, and we're entering into this understanding of essentially a planetary consciousness where we are all learning to transcend our artificial fragmentation and learning how to cooperate and collaborate with one another towards a shared purpose of collective well-being. So that's also the world I want to bring children into.
How about you, Gabriela?
Well, I would like to point out that technologies are only tools, and it depends upon us if we use them to build or to destroy. So we need to generate the incentives for use the technology and the economics and everything for the common good. Because we expect this to be voluntary. You work 2 years helping, like this prejudice, like helping should be altruistic. But if we create the proper incentives, and crypto is a catalyst for bringing these incentives into the system to build solutions, because it's profitable to build solutions, then we will attract the brightest minds in the world to solve the biggest problems, because there is a reward for doing so, instead of expecting them doing by free.
How about you, Shiva?
Yes, I would say, I mean, you have all heard this statement, in order to predict the future, let's create it. And I really see how so much of what the future of finance is currently the alternative finance. And I really hope that we move into a world where this is actually the mainstream finance. And there are other than alternative finance solutions, because there's always room for improvement, but this is what our future needs,
Definitely.
Yeah, to add to that a bit, I think the alternative finance is showing, I think, the regular finance, in that way, what the opportunities are, where you can change, what is possible, and how you can do it more efficient. And I think if you really want to boost alternative finance even more, it's now doing it on its own help, I think. We should have more level playing field. So we should also say to the regular finance, you not only should change, but you should also make sure that on everything, regulation side, support side, the alternative finance has the same opportunities as the regular finance. So I think this will be, then it will be even go much more quicker and accelerating than it's done now.
Thank you very much, all of you, for answering to these questions. I would like also to thank the audience for attending our panels. Thank you all, and see you for the next session.
And coffee break.
And coffee break.